dipole is switching into its cold phase, and El Nino is switching to La Nina. So we're going to get double cool. The Atlantic's supposed to be, smoking hot. So we get the duality of that. But whatever's happening, almost all countries are downgrading their crop forecast in unison. So where does this leave us? There's a lot of different chess pieces out here on the board that we're going to discuss tonight. Ransom, I appreciate you joining me. The floor is yours. If I remember to join you, man, my bad, please hold. One of those nights I've been running around the field trying to get in on time here. Sunset's a little bit later. Every single night, so I can get a little more field work done, a little more planting, a little bit of everything extra done. And I don't know, just coming in a bit later sometimes is what happens. Here comes Ransom right now. His view on the world, on the political end, is a bit dovetailing into mine on the agricultural and the natural world end. So, Ransom, thanks for joining. I think you're on mute still.
Actually, could you give me 1 second? I don't know if I got hacked or what, but my whole thing went down and the broadcast stopped. I was trying to get it back going here. Just give me one.
Oh, absolutely. Yes, indeed. There's also a story coming out about a guy who was running like 9 million nodes or something like this, and they would ping off fake addresses that would insert malware into your device to then send you more ads and let you click on malicious sites or just generate more ad revenue. So if you're seeing new pop-ups and sort of thing, they've just cut it off. But apparently they've been running for almost 3 years, since 2018. So some sites that you thought you'd gone to were inside a server where they were mimicking the site and then pinging you back. And as you mimicked or downloaded or clicked something on those links that they would reinsert, it would run through their server and something would pop back on your computer. Now, some of it malicious, yes. Most of it adware and different types of things to, imagine if you had 9 million extra computers under your control, how much ad revenue you could generate off that if people didn't know that it was infected like that, and all it was having you do was giving you more ads and having you click on different banners that were not from the actual true advertisers but inserted through them. Imagine the amount of traffic that could come and how many hundreds of millions of dollars they raked in over these, since 2018. And that has been disassembled, but, everybody seems to be having computer difficulties these days. Is it magnetic field lines are changing? Is it more interference with the ionosphere? I've been having problems too. Mine's running incredibly slow. Sometimes it'll be fast, and then other times it's slow. It moves by the minute like this. It's not consistent in any way, shape, or form any longer. They blame it on the router, but is it really, or is it electromagnetic disturbance? Like, is that millivolt charge that Nikola Tesla talked about pulling out of the air in the ether to power devices wirelessly? Motors running on Earth's magnetic field, magnets on opposite rotating disks do the same thing as creating steam. You just need to drive the rod. So is that millivolt charge? Generally, it's static at 6 millivolts, and that's, you're looking into electroculture, and that's what they're pulling out of the air as well. If you're winding copper down your trees or in your garden to try to capture some of that charge and boost the magnetivity of your soil, which in turn boosts plant yield, because a lot of people are using granite dust to remineralize the soil, but also if you can get that magnetism back in harmony as well, the magnetic field of the soil in addition to the minerals and then in addition to the compost fertilizers on top, can you imagine what kind of yields you could get naturally? Those plants would be so incredibly healthy, you wouldn't even need, insect control, probably. Fungicide would be a no-brainer because nothing would take hold on that plant that's so strong with its immune system. But if the millivolt charge around that is, what if it's 7 or 8 millivolts with all the electric that has been pushed in from our sun along our field lines, especially the top part of our planet, more electrified, definitely. How does that translate and go further down into the atmosphere in different layers down to where we get the cloud building at, say, 35,000 feet, somewhere there? I mean, the lower layer is 15,000, but building off. So the more electrified it would get, could it not then, when it reaches 35,000, 40,000 feet on a cumulonimbus thunderhead, then get electrified, and that becomes a feedback loop where the tip of the cloud is now touching a different inbound current, which energizes it. And here comes the C-130 over the house flying low, not as close as earlier today. By the way, there's a huge amount of C-130 traffic up in and patterning across our valleys here. Oh, now that's the second one. They're running at a pair. I've been buzzing through the valley during the daytimes here, which is super, super rare. It's only the second time I've seen this in all the years I've lived here. It's only the second time, and twice in 2 days in a daytime run. Interesting. But back to, if there was an electrified current coming in, so you have magnetic field lines, and if that charge is following from the sun to our earth running down a magnetic field line, and there's cloud formation under that line directly because of amplified charge, current, whatever you like to call that, in the air, would it not make sense if something was billowing 30, 40,000 feet that it could touch that current rope higher up in and get even more energized and have the feedback loop? Because this giant size hail that we're seeing in Colorado, also in Texas, they're trying to redefine even what hail is because it's becoming so large. You know, what kind of updraft would it take in a feedback mechanism of cloud top charging from a magnetic field line or amplified electrical atmosphere from the sun's heightened activities over the last 3 to 4 weeks, way above the normal? So imagine if it became a vortex inside the cloud, and that is the feedback loop itself, is the energized charge is creating a vortex within the storm, not a tornadic vortex, but an electrical updraft that could allow for those hailstones to grow larger. So this is where it comes into biblical prophecy, and not just the Bible, but many a prophecy across the landscape of our world through time, that large hailstones were already and always talked about being at the change of an age. And not just particular this change of an age. You know, there have been many cycles through the past. Talking about ice age cycles, Younger Dryas boundary cycles, gray cycles, 3,000-year cycles. The precession of the equinoxes, apparently, if it's 12 zodiac signs, 2,100 and what, 20 years? Or what if it's 13 zodiac signs and Apophis or Draco is removed out? Cycles within cycles. But the thing about hail is always referenced at the end of or the beginning of an electrification cycle. So if it is a feedback loop that an electrical vortex is being generated in the clouds, that in turn could manifest as a tornado on the ground, but the same thing would be true if you got like an EF1 or an EF3 tornado on the ground. If you have that same vortice going upward, connecting in that electrical connection in the Earth's electric circuit, it would make sense that that wind could haul up a 120 mile an hour wind going up 40,000, 50,000 feet as well. Now, what kind of hailstones could come in and out, in and out, in and out of that at 120 mile an hour wind, 160 mile an hour? What if it was an EF4, EF5 tornado with 200 mile per hour winds? Okay, that's 200 on the ground as well. But then what if that electric vortice is 200 mile per hour winds? Imagine the updraft, and that's why they're getting these half watermelon size hail coming down now. So there's something with this cycle that we are absolutely at the beginning of crops not being reliably grown, which will upset the balance of civilization anyway. And now all these other changes that we're seeing geopolitically, economically, all to control it for the descent in to milk as much money out as possible and wealth transference. And bouncing out of the cycle as well to make sure that power is maintained. Again, political power and economic power. The trigger for it is right now, this catalyst is happening. It's everywhere across the planet. I go through news feeds every day. There's not a place on the planet I really can find that does not have some extreme right now that's wiping out crops. It is all-encompassing. It is everywhere. It is every nation. It is every continent. The wind speeds, the hail, the rains, it's just so far outside the norm that it's doing an enormous amount of damage. So what we were talking about tonight for our show was the incrementalism, which it used to be incrementalism. Is finished. It is an exponentialism now. So you're going to watch these things play out in the next few weeks or months. So just as a general, I guess, ratio or equation, the more distraction they try to throw at you and the larger the distractions they throw at you, the closer we are getting to these natural phenomenon that are going to rip civilization apart with the lack of food and available foods. Now, one thing I do want to say, I started this Adapt 2030 channel a good 10 years ago at the end of 2014. At that time, the carryover stocks were like 750 million tons of grain that we overproduced every year that was put in silos and warehouse storage facilities and carried into the next year. And that was our surplus when we started the year. Well, you know what? We're down to about 230 million tons this year. So within that 10 years, we've lost 500 million tons of grain surplus. And now we're at, let's say, I'll be generous and say 250 million tons extra. But if you do the simple math on 20% is going to be less grown this year. It's just wherever you look, like I say, it's all encompassing across the entire globe. This is going to be a very, very low year for crop yields. So you can see why the futures prices are running away on everything. And we come back to it. The larger the distractions, the more they're distracting you. They're accomplishing two goals. They're stopping you from getting ready because you're so focused on the screen that you're not preparing. Secondly, they're distracting you so they can extract and you can react. I think that's it. I'll leave it there. I know, Ransom, I hope you gave you enough time to try to get everything back online again. But, you know, I see a wider picture like you do of all these dots connecting and the interference pattern, the electrical frequency changes, the crop changes, which also reflects in global food prices, which everybody's going absurd ape all over the food prices for fast food and things. And we see how that translates in derivatives, even on cocoa. The cocoa derivatives nearly wiped out the entire economy of Ghana, who was in the cocoa trade. Bankers got burnt because the farmers didn't want to deliver physical and other people wouldn't cash settle. So then the derivatives started to come unwound. And then all of a sudden the military's in there taking over the cocoa plantations, forcing the farmers, and grabbing what was in their storehouses to make sure that these contracts were facilitated and there was no defaults on the banks. That's crazy what they're doing with that. Just down to that level alone. That level alone of what they did with cocoa beans so the bankers wouldn't get burned. Imagine when it comes to wheat. So if we're going to be down 20%, you're going to take 50 million more tons out of the carryover stocks. We'll be, 200 or sub 200 million tons. Then what happens after the next year and the next year? It's going to be less. And then when do we go to zero? What we grow is what we get. But I think we're much closer to that. What we grow is what we get on the planet, which is disturbing everybody that's in power, that realizes hungry people are not controllable. And that's the whole Rubicon that gets crossed. It's not the jailing in New York. It's not the absurd prices that you're seeing at the supermarkets and the tax increases and everything that you see, home prices and metals and new BRICS aligned currencies running and emerging. It's not that. That's a subset of the distractions that you're involved in. We all are in our daily lives. They try to keep you so busy running on the hamster wheel that you don't see it. When the food gets disrupted to a point, the civilization is absolutely disrupted because angry people are hungry people and not controllable. That's really the only wild card. They game out a ton of scenarios, but the only scenario that's not winnable is hungry masses by the hundreds of millions coming at the centers of power. And this is what terrifies the elite, is not growing enough food. So all these distractions, are you listening out there? Ransom, floor is yours.
Well, I really think it's impressive that they have this super con going on. You could name all the distractions. We have the presidential thing today. I think that they're really hoping that will spark civil war. The problem with that is most of the people on one side of that are not the same people that were out burning the streets, causing $2 billion worth of damage. And that was over political ideas. That wasn't over a hungry stomach. Well, let's look what's really going on behind that. They've had a con, and a lot of people have been paying attention. It's called shrinkflation and inflation, and they've been raising the prices of food steadily over the past 10 years. It's been just going up and up and up and up and up and up. Now they're saying that their stores are underperforming and they're not making enough money, and they cite lots of different reasons. Lots of theft, but we all know they have insurance that covers that, and they really don't lose much to theft as far as finances. So why would they be wanting to close down lots of stores? It's because they're looking to the future, and the populace that will be there in 20 years. So let's step out of 2024 for a minute and let's just skip 20 years and think about what these headlines that are out right now mean. Okay, so, don't worry about starving because McDonald's and Burger King admit consumers are broke. So they're planning the reintroduction of the $5 meal. And it's like a school session. I watch a little bit of television and I get subjected to commercials. That's part of it. That's always been part of it. But what is so funny to me is to watch these commercials from the restaurants as they show their teeny tiny, because I'm not a big guy. I'm 5'9", I'm average size. But I know what a hamburger used to look like in my hand back in the 90s. I know what because I ate the stuff, I ate the Whoppers and all of that before I was really too educated on what it is I was eating. Now I know what I'm eating and I don't eat any of that stuff. However, I watch the commercials and I'm seeing, this guy holding with like 3 fingers a full-sized meal, they call it. And it's a teeny tiny little burger. And they're going to drop the prices to only $5. That sounds like, oh, wow, $5 meals. But you don't realize what you're actually getting is mostly packaging. And then your meal is actually really small. And then let's not even get into what is or isn't in those industrial meals that you might be purchasing for $5. But let's skip to, so that's going to get more and more people used to eating the junk food, which is equivalent to rations. They're rations. That's what they are. You're just used to, a capitalist society with the illusion of choice, but that choice is disappearing as stores are closing down and your options are disappearing. According to this article from Zero Hedge, 1 in 7 American kids live in poverty. More than 11 million children were estimated to be living in poverty in 2021. Now, in 20 years, if that 1 in those 7 kids obviously is going to increase to more in 7, 2 or 3 in 7, that number is going to increase. But for those kids that grew up being broke and hungry and dealing with, all of these geopolitical things that they don't understand as a kid on why their belly is empty or they continue to, not be in the optimal health conditions from their diet, they're going to be a lot easier to push into the streets. And what I mean by that is if you think it's bad when people are, just doing basic Marxist ideas, political ideas in the streets, and they're willing to burn, kill, and do all kinds of stuff over that. So let's think about 11 million people on top of 30 to 40 million plus extra people in the country right now. Now, those people are also living in the poverty level, and so are a lot of other people living in the poverty level. So you could see that what their, estimation of 11 million children will soon be 50 or 60 million, not just children, but grown people. There's no way to feed them. But at the same time, back here, I don't know what's coming in the future, but it looks like now they're closing shop. They're finding reasons to make you shop online or have your food delivered. DoorDash, they don't even have fees anymore now if you join their little club, and they'll just bring you food from the fast food restaurants nonstop, even if you live in a little town. So this isn't something that's centralized in the city anymore, but even people in rural areas and smaller towns, smaller cities across America are becoming accustomed to and voluntarily joining these groups or these clubs that, deliver food to their door, which means that they're not going to be going to the supermarket and buying more healthy foods that are also shrinking as far as choices and availability. So here's a article from Daily Mail. Stop and Shop supermarket chain sparks fears of mass closures as difficult decisions hinted by their bosses. Over 400 stores are set to close. This is just one franchise that's on the East Coast. And then you have Target, Aldi, Walmart, all of these guys saying that they're lowering prices, that they've steadily been hiking up over time. And if you know the Walmart's trick, that's the rollback on prices. It's just to roll back to the already elevated price that they had at the beginning of each year. So they just roll it back to already previously, too much price for things, making you think that you're saving money. Another thing that I've noticed while grocery shopping, the bulk items are disappearing because they know people that have any kind of intelligence or 2 cents about them can see the fad that's coming of the inavailability of getting the proper nutrition. And so those bulk items are now disappearing. Now, you might live in an area where this hasn't, messed with you yet, but I've been paying attention to every store I go to. And I've always known that the town I live in is a good mock-up of how the economy is really doing. So if I go to the store and there's not much there, I know people are hurting because they're buying all of what there is available of a certain item. So like when I go there won't be that much meat. And if there is meat, there will be very small amounts of organic meat. And now that if you look at the prices, we were there the other day and I'm looking at a New York strip, an organic New York strip for $9 a pound, versus the regular, beefs, we'll call it that are now getting new kind of medications. So that's a reality that you have to, when you're navigating food, that some of the food is tainted. And I found out, with lots of study, pork has been on this program since 2016. A lot of people thought that these lettered medicines, if you know what I'm talking about, that we recently dealt with on the human level in the past couple of years. Well, they've been giving that to the swine since 2016, and now they're starting to give it to dairy cows, which is the source of most people's milk, cheese, butter. So everything's being manipulated. And if you know that, you're going to be shopping for real food when you go to the grocery store. You're going to be looking for the organic items. Although they're not completely untainted, they're a better choice than the other more heavily tainted foods that are there with, everything from pesticide to what I was talking about, new medications that they're trying to pass on through your diet. So the problem comes up, there's no food. So where does that come from when people start to realize, a lot of these problems are happening, like shortages, tainted food. And the more and more that happens, the more and more there's going to be less to choose from because more people will awake to what's really going on. And what's going on is actual real food is becoming scarce, but food like some substances are becoming abundant. And that's been replacing the food that everyone eats, I would say, since 1991 when GMOs really hit the market. But before that, I know anybody that lived through the 80s, that was the decade of sales. They came up with so many new products, and then that continued through the 90s, new flavors, new colors, supposedly scientific advances in, food creating, so you don't have to cook or prepare or do any of the, domestic things that you have to do to prepare your food. As a matter of fact, I just saw a commercial for a grilled cheese sandwich so that kids can just throw it in the microwave and it'll come out crispy and delicious. Now, I don't know what kind of alchemy they're using to do that, but I learned long ago you shouldn't eat food out of the microwave. It destroys all of the nutrients and proteins in the food. So if it's already heavily processed and then they're using, people are being indoctrinated into cooking in these ways, and that food comes out of a box or a container, and it doesn't come, from a farm, and it doesn't come from your yard, and it doesn't come from the sweat of your brow. It comes from a little corporate box. Then you will have no problem taking the rations that'll be delivered to your door through these systems that are being set up and eat your ration at home. And then you won't have to go out and deal with the hungry masses that are out there. But to get into some, we can go
Ransom.
on. Yeah, go ahead.
Ransom, do I get a TV dinner with my ration?
I think your ration will look like a TV dinner. That's pretty much what it will be. But the question is what are you eating? You know, two states have banned lab-grown meat. However, if there is a meat shortage in the future, don't you think that our dear leaders would go ahead and do some good administrating and governing by making an emergency availability of a new meat source if the people are mad about not being able to eat meat, which is something they've been attacking. And if you've been paying attention to the headlines, you know that they really are pushing this next outbreak, right? The bird flu epidemic, and we have dengue fever and West Nile fever, and all these other things that you think about. Oh, I don't want to get bit by the mosquitoes, but guess what? All of the livestock that you could possibly be eating, organic and non-organic, is sitting in fields and pastures infested with mosquitoes. There's mosquitoes everywhere. Anywhere there's rain, there's going to be mosquitoes in summertime. And we know that there have been several companies that just so happen to help out the genetic code of said mosquitoes for various different reasons. And now it's beginning to come to a point where there is a very slim path to navigate the new technologies that are out there that are changing not only what we think is food, but how it's prepared, how it's delivered, and who in the future might get it. Because think about this: if you're a naughty boy, you might not get, your digital currency capabilities to join these clubs to get your food delivered, which means you'll have to go to a mass distribution site, which will most likely be run by a governmental agency. Now, I know this sounds far-fetched, but think about all the stuff, like I said, between now and 20 years that's coming about. We're almost definitely going to have a world conflict. They have several more potential outbreaks that they are worried about. And you see the existence of lawfare and banana republics in the entire Western world. So that's all collapsing. Just the basic thread that keeps civilization together, believing that your country has some kind of law and order, and then you see that turned on its head. That means that, you can't depend on them to protect you. And that includes with food. And here we are. This is the one I was talking about. So they are prepared for this, and they are going to double down on the fast food and the delivery food. You mark my words, that's going to become the standard way. And guess what? If there's crime or violence or any of that kind of stuff out there, or maybe some kind of sickness that they're telling you to stay home for, you're going to be getting your food delivered to your home. That's the way it's going to be. And I'm almost positive that by next year you will see the major chains like Target, Walmart offer home delivery. That means groceries to your home, and that'll become the standard practice because they don't want you in the stores. And that's why they've been slowly making it where you have less and less interaction with actual human beings when it comes to getting your food. Before long, it will be automated. You'll just show up and pick up what you're allowed to buy. And there is already rations going on with gasoline. I don't know if you've seen that, but several companies have gone over to AI to decide that you have a limit on how much gasoline you can buy per purchase. And you're going to start seeing more of that with other things. Oh, well, you can only buy so many of this. You can only have so much seeds. You can only have so much soil. You can only buy so much food because, well, there are plenty of other people that also need their rations. So what happens to 1 in 7 American kids when they live through poverty and become 11 million people ready to march on the streets because they're upset that we've destroyed the way of life that their parents, grandparents, and great-grandparents lived, and all they have is a leftover, computer-controlled Marxist society where everything is opposite than the way it is.
That depends if they have any hope as to their actions. But so far, it seems like hope is being drained like an oil change in a car. I found your Walmart Target Unleash Price Cuts Tsunami article here. Let me read. And there's some problems in South America, too. So Walmart and Target, and I want to come back to Walmart's food pricing. So this is a warning for everybody out there in food prices in Walmart. But both of these stores Consumers will enjoy savings on everyday items such as milk, meat, bread, soda, fresh fruit, vegetables, snacks, yogurts. Is it really, or is it peanut butter, coffee, diapers, paper towels, pet food, and more, said both retailers. So what's going on? Okay, I understand beating earnings or, missing earnings. I get it. But for both of these giant retailers to roll back prices at the exact same time, who's pushing the levers on where prices go for favoritism or hope in the society? All right, it takes hope for people to keep going. You have to have something that's going to get better tomorrow. It's going to be a better world. I can do something to make this place better. So Target announced they're going to lower everyday prices on regular items, 5,000 frequently shopped items across its assortment or supply, whatever. Going to take course over the summer. Now it's not going to be immediate, so they can keep rolling back and saying, hey, there is, we haven't implemented that yet. So if you go to the store tomorrow and you think the prices will be down just because they put the news announcement out, I don't know. But as I said, it was going on across the globe, and I'm down in Merco Press here, South Atlantic News Agency on the agricultural tab. And I usually go to this to look for South American crop news. It could be meat, could be bean, could be any types of crops that are outbound there. They got coconut oil. There's a whole bunch of different tradables there. So agricultural emergency declared in Uruguay. 120-day agricultural emergency for the consequences of the severe floods hitting parts of the country. And you would say, well, David, they just harvested everything while there was a drought. And I will say, I agree. So that was it. The whole South American season's been plagued by drought, low harvest yields anyway. And then as soon as the harvest was finished, lo and behold, rivers from the sky, most rain in 150, someplace they say 180 years. Well, rivers are overspilling their banks onto the storage facilities. And the places that just stored all that previously harvested grain, which was below normal because of drought, is now being, well, deemed either degraded, not saleable, or for animal feed because moisture's gotten in there somehow. Or some of it's just been simply washed away or super soaked where it starts to sprout and they can't sell it, maybe for animal food locally. That's in Uruguay. And then Rio Grande do Sul, which is in southern Brazil, still recovering from record floods. 650,000 people needed to move because of the floods. Now that's in the prime growing area. So, what's going on with harvests there as well? The storage of grain is going to be a considerable thing to look forward to moving forward. You said the next 20 years. Well, I absolutely believe that storage facilities are going to have to move further inland away from the rivers. What we've established right now is river systems that have been contained and worked on, river works projects, levees, dikes, etc., ports, causeways, anything to keep that water flowing where it should go. We've done that for 150 years. We have a good idea where the water is going to go to, where it might apex out, flood the banks over, put some levees up there. But what we're seeing now with these rivers from the sky, this unbelievable, tremendous amount of rain. When it rains, it's, it used to be a gentle rain where now it just soaks where, a half-hour rain and you're ankle-deep water. For 3 or 4 hours like that, you're knee-deep water. Rain for 2 weeks straight like that, and that's what they're seeing down in southern South America. The Mississippi River's been flooding like that routinely for the last few years as well. They come in at the harvest, and then suddenly we got these near record floods, and then a lot of levees break and facilities are flooded. This happens routinely down the Mississippi River, especially in the last 3 years that I can remember. A lot of grain's being lost. No, it never really happened like that before. Now we have it happening in South America too, where all these grains are going to get washed away and they're really, relegated back to animal feed. So what happens there with supposed crop production? Now, most of that was slated to go to China. And China's been on a buying spree. I did a whole thing about copper earlier. Like, what's China going on the buying spree so heavily for? Literally off the Richter. And I had something here about, wait a second, where was my media player? I got to find that. Wanted to take a look at Walmart. when you go to weigh something in Walmart, make sure you put it on the scale, because people are finding when they pick up chicken specifically, when chicken, they put it on the scale and they find out that it's not exactly the correct weight. So they put a sticker on your food when you go in and buy it. It's just in the cellophane wrap and it says this is this many pounds and it costs you this much. People look at that and go, okay. They never weigh it. They never weigh it. What's been happening in Walmart is they're putting a higher weight on it with a higher price tag, but when you put it on the scale, it could be, a pound or more less on the scale than what is stated on the label on the weight. So think about that also as being able to check, because in the future, if we're going to be trading gold, silver, people are going to be exchanging silver, things are going to be down to a half ounce, so things are going to be quite exact, and you're going to be used to measuring a lot more stuff more carefully and precisely than any time in our history, our modern history, last few hundred years. So who's going to be that careful to check when you're getting wrapped meats to put it on the scale every time? And then what do you do if it doesn't? They're just going to take the package away and be like, oh, I made a mistake. I must have gone on the wrong package. Okay, well, then what type of redress do you have? And can you go back and you do it a few times a week? Are they doing this continuously? And that's another thing that needs to be asked, because these videos coming out of people routinely finding this. What point does it become fraud where they're doing it on purpose because they know most people won't check the labels? These big corporations are there, but they're still milking you because of, I guess, carelessness on all of our parts, because we were brought up to believe that the sticker on that reflected the correct weight. Like when you go in to get a gallon of gasoline and you pump a gallon, you expect those pumps to be checked with some sort of certification on it, so 1 gallon equals 1 gallon. Is it really a gallon in some stations? Like, what's going to happen when the fuel supply gets low? Are they going to be able to rig the pumps so it's not really a gallon? Like if you bring a 5-gallon jug in, is it going to be really filling to 5, or will it fill it to like 4.8 or 4.75? And you'll be like, oh, close enough. These are the types of changes that are going to occur in our society here, where you're absolutely going to have to start measuring everything, because it seems that the cheating going on of said measurements is already like in full play, for a better term. So buyer beware, I guess, would be the best thing. And then I want to add one thing off of Zero Hedge here. This comes a rancher. Record high beef prices may be the new norm. This came out on May 28, just yesterday, or 2 days ago. Beef prices skyrocketed due to new record highs this Memorial Day weekend, as industry experts warn costs could continue to rise higher if current regulatory and economic conditions remain unchanged. What they're talking about is the regulations, is the CAFO and the contained feedlot legislation that's been sweeping through a lot of states, where if you have 1 or 2 cow, you have to put in $100,000 worth of, water protection equipment. That's for like things that have 1,000 cows, 500 cows in a contained feedlot where they don't free range. They just like feed them in a trough and they sit there and they pee, and then, it's got to be collected, obviously. But if you got 2 cows on, 20 acres in your own homestead, if they're anywhere those cows can rock up and like sit on a piece of cement or gravel, like your gravel driveway, for example, that's considered a contained feedlot, and all this legislation, all these new things. So that's what they're talking about there, regulatory conditions. I guess, because Ransom, you said you got a steak there, sirloin. Well, this is grass-fed lean ground beef, $11.99 a pound. And organic ground beef, $12.99 a pound. But it seems like what you had with, I believe you said it was sirloin, was coming in a little bit cheaper than that. So I'm curious. And then the last point I had is, even though we, as individuals getting ready for these changes and knowing that our bodies will need more nutritious foods moving forward to move us through these days of change with more work involved, planting, exercising, helping others, get crops in and out, this kind of thing, repairing equipment, moving equipment, this all takes a bit of extra energy. keep in mind, at least 20% of the population is still going to go to the junk food. So, in our estimation, it's like everybody's going to wake up at the same time, and we're all going to have to fight for the same exact foods at the same time with all these people in the supermarkets. Well, I can, absolutely unequivocally say that 20% of those people won't be there because they'll never wake up. And they'll always be eating the junk food, the fast foods, the processed foods. And if that's not your game, then you can subtract 20% of your competition immediately. So then, what you need to look at is also some of these off grains, like spelt, for example. And I bet you walk into a store and everybody would have bought all the wheat flours, all the rice is gone. And if they had any lentils, those are gone. Beans, dried beans, lima beans, whatever, any kind of beans, black-eyed peas, gone. But spelt might sit there for a minute because at least in just the regular American culture, spelt is not a well-cooked or well-known item. Now you get different cultures, different continents, boom, that's the first thing off the shelf they're looking for. Amaranth, not a widely cooked one here, but yeah, South America, they cook it all the time. So there's going to be some, protein items and grain items left on the shelves that not a lot of Americans are familiar with, but it offers another opportunity just fighting for wheat flour in the baking section, I guess. So anyway, Ransom, I'll turn it back to you. I know that's long-winded, but I had so much going on with the food and the crop losses and things. It's stupendous. It's overwhelming on how many crop losses there are. Truly, it's overwhelming. I can't even keep up anymore. Really can't.
Yeah, I know. That's what I think regular folks or people out there, they just can't do it. I mean, I'm sitting here and I look at one article. This one says 37% of Americans paid a late fee in the last 12 months. Well, what that means to me is 37% of Americans are broke and they're trying to figure out what they're doing with their money, which is going to buy food. That's what they're doing with it. So they put off a payment because they'll get some money later, or they think they will, and then they make a late payment because they needed to eat. But you're right. The whole thing is kooky. And it's like I just feel like Nostradamus all the time because, we're talking about the food and the water. Just off the top of my head, you remember they killed all the dairy cows, all of the ones that died in the fire. And this was just recently. It's been happening for years. Chicken plants, turkey plants, all of these things are going up. And now they're saying everything has the bird flu. So they're going to have to kill, I don't know, remember what it was like 1 million birds or something like that.
4.2 million just in Iowa at an egg farm. 4.2 million just in one Iowa egg farm. And then they had another fire today where 3.5 more million chickens perished. So right there, you almost have 7 million egg layers offline. So that's 7 million eggs per day out of the system immediately.
Right. So we've been seeing an incremental damage to it. At some point, all of it has to come to a head. And then I wanted to point out this one. Water systems warn Americans that they could soon see major rate hikes to filter out the toxic forever chemicals that they put in your water. They put it in there. They allowed the companies to use them. It's not like it's a new idea or that we didn't know about it for a long time. But now they're going to, on top of everything else, how about we charge you to take the poison out of your food and water? How about that? I mean, that's just a wonderful idea.
No, thanks. You can bill Monsanto.
Oh, my God. But yeah, just think about that. And, I keep telling my son that he just is about to hit 19, and I'm telling him, you're going to inherit this world of all this stuff that I talk about. And that's why I give it a 20-year time period, because they incrementalize everything so that the average person does not have time to remember or think about all the things happening simultaneously. Like you could just pick a topic. You were talking about grains and all of this stuff, and it immediately made me think, what's going to happen to the U.S. economy when less food comes out of Mexico? Because if you've been paying attention to Mexico, there's all kinds of major issues going on right now. They're killing politicians left and right. The same party is probably going to take over with a different face, but it's going to be the same party. They're buddies with Maduro, and you just see this whole aligning of nations happening, which makes you wonder where the food's coming from. So if you live in Mexico City, they're cutting off the water because supposedly they're running out of water, and this is a place that rains all the time, has hurricanes, flooding, and all these other things, but they're having problems with clean water. And then you look at the Americans, and they're talking about, hey, you know what? We're just going to charge you a little more because we have to build new filtration systems to take out the chemicals that are already in the water, which, by the way, where do those things come from? They come from the industrial farming and industrial manufacturing of things. And recently, we've seen a lot of those things go up in flames and add to the overall contamination of the planet. That's just one topic. That's not talking about the amount of plastics and plasticides that are in everything inside of you. Everybody was joking, I think, last week because the article came out saying that 90% of men had plastic in their testicles and that it probably will never come out. It's in you. It's within you. And that brings me to the leap forward of when is it that technology and biology are actually mixing, because it seems like that is happening now. And at some point, the incrementalism has to come to a head. And all of these things that we've told everybody about, you remember we were joking around in early 2020 about it wouldn't be long till you saw drones doing police work in the United States, just like they were doing in China. And here it is, Denver police to dispatch drones to 911 calls instead of sending police. So when you call 911, somebody's stabbing you to death or breaking into your home, you can call 911 and they'll just send a drone out to see if it's an actual emergency. And, if you thought the response time was bad then, what do you think it's going to be like when some guy sitting in an office deciding whether or not it's actually an emergency and whether or not they have the funds to send troops there, basically, because that's what they are. They're troops. They're troops that are supposed to keep law and order, but that's not what they're doing. And now we're going to be, completely policed by an interconnected system of all of these AIs. And at the same time, you got scientists telling us, don't worry about it. You could live forever by 2030. But at the same time, a third person in the U.S. dead from bird flu. And they're talking about how it's different this time because, he had all of these different kind of symptoms. And I don't know how much your trust is into the news apparatus about telling you what's going on. But I found this article interesting from Zero Hedge, or excuse me, Sputnik. Now some people might discount it because it's Russian. But anyway, this is an article talking about how U.S. lawmakers are focused on how they could use nuclear weapons, but the little ones, just smaller ones with lower yield, so we could have a limited nuclear war. Now, that sounds a lot like what we've been talking about over the last couple of years. A controlled, limited nuclear exchange that would change the world completely. And you hear them talking about it right here. So they're talking about their SLCMN cruise missiles with low-yield nuclear warheads launched from surface ships or attack submarines. And this way they can, they could just pop a couple cities. There won't be long-lasting radiation. This is only like a less than 10 kiloton of explosive power. So what we're talking about is a bunch of small Hiroshima, Nagasaki type explosions going off in a war. And then let's talk about the war itself. What's going on with that? It seems like they have spent their money, and I'll get to what I mean by that. They've spent their money. They've put it all into stuff. So it makes you wonder what's going to happen when there's an actual conflict that involves, the Western nations directly. So if I could find it here. Yeah. Army, this is talking about the British Army. It shrinks below 73,000 troops, first time since the Napoleonic era. And let's see here. Well, basically, it's the same story everywhere. It's drone attacks. It's not people. They're cutting back on people, or they can't get people to join where they want them to. So they're going to introduce conscription everywhere. You've heard Germany talk about it and some of the other countries. And then what's really happening out there is a bunch of robotic warfare that is just wiping people off the face of the earth. All of these old school things like big boats and aircraft carriers and stuff, guess what? They really can't compete with the new technology. And I don't know where that's going to go. So it puts a new idea on what's actually going to happen. But Ukraine destroyed 7 boats in an attack in the Black Sea. And this shows you kind of where it's going. And here's another one. Biden's secretary secretly gave Ukraine permission to strike inside Russia with U.S. weapons, but we already knew that from some of the attacks we've seen. So everybody is low on troops, low on ammunition, but only on one side of the conflict. So it makes you wonder, is this all just a setup and part of the formation of a one world government? They need certain things that they didn't get the last couple times we had a world war. If you remember, they were calling it the war to end all wars. We need a League of Nations. We need a United Nations. We got to stop it. But instead, they use those bodies to implement their agenda and push for war in different places. And that's exactly what we're seeing. The question is how do we eat if the whole world stops trading and, doing transfers of products to other countries? Because that's how we're set up now. If you go to the store, a lot of the products do not come from the United States. Most of them do not. If you went to the store and just took out everything that came from another country, especially if you shop at Walmart, you would barely have any meats, any grains, or anything. There would be nothing but like cereal and Doritos and stuff in the store. You can't eat that. That's not going to sustain a population. And everybody has their proverbial head up their rear end right now because, like you said, there's just so hard distractions going on. The dilemma of which way our election's going, which is weird because if half the nation thinks that the election wasn't trustworthy last time, why do they think they're going to vote themselves out of the problem this year? So you kind of have to ignore all of that and pay attention to what's real, which is just to first get you in order, then get your family in order, and then you're going to have to figure out a community or a tribe, or you're just not going to be here in a couple of decades. That's just the way I see it. And I try to be positive. There are a lot of positive things, but not on the world scale.
If you stay in this vibratory pattern, maybe it's time for us to change the vibration and split this world. Let the darkness just drift to the bottom of the sea, into a deep water canyon somewhere as we rise into the light and start this world over and we take our planet back. That's another possibility. It's all about the collective consciousness as well. The elite are so terrified that we all come together under a united cause that we start to think together. It seems like when we come to these points where humanity is starting to bind together as a single thinking thought that can bend reality with the combined thoughts of all those humans together, these huge distractions come out.
Just under 1,500 years ago, something terrifying happened to the world's climate, something nobody could understand. The sun began to go dark. Rain, the color of blood, poured from the skies. Clouds of fine dust enveloped the earth. Winter gripped the land for 2 years. Then came drought, famine, plague, and death. Whole cities were wiped out. Civilizations crumbled, and nobody knew what had happened. It was a catastrophe that affected millions and millions of people all around the world. But what was it? A catastrophic climatic event buried in the heart of the Dark Ages. This mid-6th century catastrophe was the most important date in the history of the past 2,000 years. This event created the world we live in today, something far removed from the minds of everyday peoples of our modern times. Unbeknownst to most, the catastrophe could at any time happen again. The volcanic winter was caused by at least 3 simultaneous eruptions of uncertain origin, with several possible locations proposed in various continents. There is even evidence of an extraterrestrial factor. A possible origin for this object could be the Taurid meteor stream. This stream is the result of the fragmentation of a much larger comet some 20,000 years ago. The Earth passes through the Taurid stream in November and June each year, resulting in regular meteor showers normally consisting of microscopic dust particles. A fragmentation of the stream is thought to have occurred around 500. It is possible that a fragment could then have collided with the Earth as it passed through the beta portion of the stream early in 536, causing the atmospheric dust veil event. The relevance is crop failures for several years in a row. While the dust veil was present, it may have caused widespread starvation, leading to an increased susceptibility to disease among the remaining population. Small comets had previously been thought to be less hazardous than small asteroids, but estimates show that a small comet fragment can have a global effect. In early AD 536, or possibly even late 535, an eruption or eruptions ejected massive amounts of sulfate aerosols into the atmosphere. The solar radiation reaching the Earth's surface reduced dramatically, and this rapidly cooled the atmosphere. Despite what the global warming nuts say, the sun seems to be the main driver of temperature and climate. The main historical aspect of the period around 536 may also be the most significant, especially to those descendants of the survivors. Who would be us today? This period coincides with a mass population decrease in Europe, in the Americas, the Middle East, and in Asia. In Europe, this is commonly known as the Justinian period, named after the Justinian plague, and is believed to be the first appearance of the Black Death in Europe. Meanwhile, in the Mayan Empire, things were looking bad. Researchers have realized that there is a 100-year gap in the civilization's productivity starting in 540, suggesting a dark age. The civilization experienced mass crop failure, which led to disease, starvation, and likely internal strife. People evacuated cities in and around present-day El Salvador. Cities that were left behind experienced a dark age, as evidenced by a gap in written records and a sudden decrease in construction in Maya city centers during the 6th century. In China, 536 was no better. Frost and snow in July and August that killed the seedling crop, causing a major famine the following autumn. Weather was so severe that 70 to 80% of the people starved to death. Procopius. The sun gave forth its light without brightness, like the moon, during this whole year, and it seemed exceedingly like the sun in eclipse. The sun was dark, and its darkness lasted for 18 months. Each day it shone for about 4 hours, and still this light was only a feeble shadow. Michael the Syrian. If such an event happened today, and crops failed over a significant part of the globe for several consecutive years, then once again a large percentage of the world's population would face starvation. Thankfully, unlike the peoples of the worst year to be alive, we don't have to worry about not having food to last. We have my Patriot supply. And right now, you can save $200 on a 3-month food kit with Adapt 2030. Adapt and stay prepared.
I talked with my broker also. My rates are going up 30%, although I've never had even a single claim. But because it costs more to fix, in case I did, or other people's accidents are costing more to fix, insurance companies are looking for more money, let's say. So here's one that I saw on Twitter earlier today, and Revolution Radio, thank you for letting us talk about these types of things here. Free speech on air, Revolution Radio. What up? Thumbs up. Think about donation. Keep the production costs, running costs, station costs. There are some expenses bringing this information to you on a centralized platform. But if you think it's worth your time and money, because this will be one of the last bastions of information flow that you will find as others go down across the way. So I'm over here on Twitter. I pulled this off earlier. Received an updated policy from his insurance company. This one is called Auto Owners. Auto owners are automobiles, but he's got a homeowner's insurance, I guess, on this. I live in Michigan, and we aren't prone to earthquakes. They keep expecting me to pay my policy, yet they won't cover my home due to any loss from, get this, earth sinking, earth rising, or earth shifting. Now, what a bizarro, it's not even a full page. It's like just one paragraph and then sincerely at the bottom with the broker's name. Just, three sentences, one of them obviously longer. So what do they know that they're not telling us? Now, Ransom and I are here talking about electromagnetic changes, political changes, earth changes that affect not only food production, but also social stability. And intertwined all in this with the Earth's magnetic field will be the Earth's crust adjusting to the changing magnetic field of our planet and the electrification of our atmosphere. And here they come out, Earth sinking, Earth rising, Earth shifting. Any kind of damage like that, we can no longer cover your home. That's a weird one. I don't know. It comes out of the blue, just like whoosh. You explain that one to me, Ransom. We're back on. Welcome, second hour.
I was wondering if that's why everybody goes crazy every couple decades or more. When you sit there and look at history and you wonder what were they thinking, like why were they being crazy and hacking people to pieces and stuff. It might have been because everybody thought differently, and I think that that's key right now, because unlike any of those other times before, you have a apparatus of technology to direct that, and now we've got into the sciences of messing with it, manipulating the way people feel, think, and react to situations. So they have the populace in a weird position. Basically, they control the method in which they get all their information. So when we talk about one of the last ways that you can give out free speech, which like on Revolution Radio, even those things are going to start disappearing because the algorithms are going to start censoring in real time. So like when you share the things, no one sees it. When you post it somewhere, they don't see it in their feed. So these messages and ideas are coming up to a time where they're going to be zero. We passed the time of global communication, and now we have global censorship. And that's been their main problem right now. I mean, think about Hong Kong. I'm sure no one even thinks about it at all anymore. But for a time there was people out there protesting, and they did not want to, be injected into the communist system there. They were even out there with American flags and all that stuff. The same thing was happening in Venezuela. We didn't come to their aid. We didn't make a stand. And now no one even thinks about those things anymore. What happened to all those people? Where'd they go? What happened to them? I do think about that, and I think about it, right here in the aspect of the country I live in. After seeing that kangaroo stuff today, who knows where the technologies are going to go? And this is, let me put up this article here. The new X policy forces earners to verify their government ID with an Israeli verification company, facial ID and all that stuff. You have CEOs telling people that they need to get prepared. I'll just put it that way. Technocrats developing new line of wearable AI devices to track data of its users and anyone they come in contact with. And that's something that I've absolutely talked about, how the Internet of Things, or in other words, all of the devices, all of the chips, all of the phones, tablets, computers, everything, the little devices at your street corner that run the CCTV cameras and the 5G and the whole bit, it's all interlinked into AI at this point. So any number of people could use these technologies against you. It doesn't have to be, the government boogeyman, but any person with the technical know-how can start messing with you with this. And then you have, like I said, even the police are skipping over to AI and drones to take care of their policing. And they're selling the idea of us living forever. But I don't think that's going to be for everybody. It's going to be for some people. But it's not going to be for everybody. And I'm just watching the first destruction of the food, because and I know we've mentioned this before. This seems like an invasion, but since there's no invading force, they're still using the format. First, you make people weak, and you do that by messing with their food. You can also get them sedentary by giving them lots of vices. Namely, like, and I'm a proponent for freedom, but at the same time, I see what some freedom allows the public to do. So most of the country is dealing with drug epidemics of one kind or another. They're legalizing other things that keep people pacified, and then at the same time feeding them hours and hours and hours of propaganda. I've been trying to watch movies, like, because I skipped probably a decade of watching television, just because I just the idea of fake people having fake situations, and then the idea that they're manipulating me as the viewer slowly with ideas, but on top of that, manipulating my feelings and emotions for people that don't exist in scenarios that didn't happen. But they're experts at this, and now everything is all tied into this algorithm, and not one algorithm, but lots of algorithms. But eventually, they're all going to be the same thing. And I'm looking through the headlines, and all I see is AI, 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 AI. Here's one right here, and the knife swings both ways. So AI might actually in the future be a friend to some people in the way that it hacks the system and gives out information. Here's one article from the Sun: AI anarchy. OpenAI rushes to ban God Mode Chat GPT, an app that teaches users how to create napalm, hotwire cars, or cook methamphetamines in their home. Now, those sound like some pretty bizarre things, but that sounds very reminiscent to the Anarchist Cookbook, but in a digital format. And if you know what that book is, well, good for you. And if you don't, then you don't know what I'm talking about. But that book has
Ransom,
been.
can you come closer to the microphone? It sounds like you're echoing super far away.
Is this better?
Oh, way better.
Okay, yeah, I guess it's the direction there. Sorry about that. But yeah, it's the modern version of the Anarchist Cookbook, and they're losing their head because the technology is increasing so fast that even the controllers are having trouble controlling it. And I see them blaming, hackers and other things, or failed AI. Matter of fact, I watched a great movie. Unfortunately, because it's a Chinese-made movie, the bad guys are the Americans in the movie, but it wasn't really that far-fetched. And it was called Creator, and I highly recommend it. It was very entertaining and a trippy idea. And basically what it was is we went down this path of AI and robotics, and everybody had a mate or a servant, whatever you want to call it, that was artificial intelligence, and they were good. And then some kind of accident happened in California that set off a nuclear device. And so they blamed the robotics and AI, and they went after it to take it out. And it turned out to be a human error in coding, and they blamed the AI. But it was a really good movie. But you could see the propaganda from the Chinese perspective. Everyone in the Asian world in the movie accepted the AI, befriended the AI, and actually was on the same side in kind of a World War III scenario against the evil Americans that were trying to wipe it out. Now, I don't think that actually would happen, but it was funny to see the AI for the propaganda from someone else's point of view. It was pretty obvious the Americans were the bad guy. And then you watch American TV, and guess what? The American people are the bad guy, not the government. They're always good. The police are good. They always show the intel people as these heroes and all of that stuff. And it's the American people that believe in rights and individual freedoms. Those are the bad guys. And that's the kind of propaganda we get fed over here to our people in mass. So it's no wonder how they could charge a sitting president with a bunch of crimes that they didn't have to prove and still get a jury to find him completely guilty. And I don't even like the guy, but it's an obvious mockery of a justice system, and it puts out no hope for the individual with their rights. But don't worry about it, because this technological sword swings both ways, and they're trying to ban it as fast as they're creating it. Here's another one. Think about this. Everybody's worried about their health. Well, what if your health is decided by robo-doctors? Here's another one. Inside China's AI hospital. RoboDoc, world's first AI hospital, unveiled in China with robot doctors who can treat 3,000 patients in a day and save millions. How about that? This isn't the first.
They should get their own TV show.
Right. But I'm sure they don't want to talk about like all of the people that get killed from the robotics being misaligned or miscoded or anything. And here's an alarming map, and I'll leave this with you. Alarming map reveals China's takeover of U.S. farmland, and they show Oregon, Washington, California, Arizona, Utah, Colorado, Texas, Oklahoma, Nebraska, Kansas, Arkansas, Missouri, Ohio, let's see here, Illinois, all the way to the East Coast, not counting Tennessee. The Tennessee's one gray spot in this map. But at least over half of the states in the U.S. have sold a lot of assets to the Chinese. So if we were to have some kind of limited nuclear warfare, do you think any of these nukes would hit these gray areas, or do you think that they would hit the red areas where they've bought stuff? I wouldn't think so. So I don't know. What do you think about that? And the fact that, don't you ever wonder why the United States has never done the same thing in reverse? In other words, how come we don't own, lots of farmland in Africa and in Brazil and in China and all these other places? Because, well, they probably don't allow that as much. But not only that, we only put military bases in other countries.
Yeah, as you had the map on there, I was looking at the total crop acreage here in the United States versus the 347,000 acres that the Chinese own in all of these different states. Now, Tennessee is not one, which is interesting. So let's see what the answer is here. Total, there we go. Statista has a little something for us, maybe. My computer's running really incredibly slow here. Total land area, farms, okay, so 950,000 acres. Now, that can't be right because there's 33 million acres in the Sahel, and there must have been 12 million acres, crop acres in the U.S. Let's go to Farm Doc here. Yeah, it's 330 million acres. I'm like, that doesn't make sense.
Yeah, this one
because
says
Canada and the United States,
340.
So just say again.
Oh, I said this map here says that they own a whopping 347,000 acres.
Right, and I was trying to compare that with the total number of millions of acres in the U.S., total crop acreage in the U.S. for this year, 350 million acres. And it was the average from 1998 to 2014 on the average, 359 million acres under total crop production in the United States. So if we take that number of 345,000, then that's just fractions of a fraction, comparatively. That's way less than 1%. That's 1/100th of a 1%, or is that 1/1000th of 1%? If they only owe 349,000 acres, and we got 349 million acres, yeah, it would be 1/1000th. So is that a news story? Some country owns 1/1000th of the American farmland.
I think it's where they own that little bit of acreage that's more important than how much. Because when you look at the map there, they got all the good spots in California, some of the best spots in Texas, some of the best spots in Utah for agriculture. And then when you go over to Virginia, China seems to own the majority of the state there, or at least half of it. Maybe that's South Carolina there. It's hard to tell on that map, or North Carolina. But yeah, there's a map with these little areas that shows where they have it. But just the whole idea of America for sale, but we're not going to let our own people really do too good because we're going to regulate them out of existence. But guess who doesn't follow those regulations and doesn't care?
How China's buying up farmland across the U.S. And again, is that going to be used for what type of crops are being grown there too? And I'm curious what the Chinese have substituted from our traditional growing zones for crops. So for an example, down in the panhandle of Texas, they had 100-year lows for 2 years in a row for sorghum. So sorghum yields coming out of the panhandle of Texas were at 100-year historic lows 2 years ago, and then last year they had 100-year lows in yield again. So if you were going to grow something in that area, you would know that sorghum no longer works, so you would have to switch the crop. So if the Chinese are in some of these areas where our crops are not being as hardy in the grow zones that they used to be, for a number of like freeze days, or how much rainfall is there, last freeze or first frost, these kind of different variables in crop planting. you would have to switch your crops as everything else is being switched around too. And they understand these changes. Like, you got to think about world history. If you believe it is the timeline it is, now it's just an if. 4,000 years from Chinese history. Would they have longer records about climatic zones shifting? I did a whole presentation when I was very lucky to know Ian Crane, who used to run the Alternative View conferences in the UK before he passed away from cancer. They were very much on the anti-fracking movement in the UK, and they were responsible for banning of fracking, as we understand, underground exploration and fracking of oil wells in the UK, because that was their thing. They stopped that. So I was lucky enough to go there, and one of the presentations I did was talking about the understanding of the Chinese along the Silk Road, all the way from Beijing over to Istanbul. Multi-thousand years of grand solar minimum cycles at the bare minimum of 400-year cycle, with the transiting of goods across that Silk Road for, let's say, 3,000 years of that, or 2,000. I'll even give you half of just Chinese history. The Silk Road was active 3,000 years prior. You would still know 5 times of when these shifts came in electromagnetically, of how each place along the Silk Road changed. And I'm sure there would have been heavier, more powerful cycles of those, probably a combination of 5 in a 2,000-year cycle, which would have wetted previous desert areas. And oases would have expanded greatly, and they would have seen these changes come and go. And then, yeah, sometimes it expands a little bit, it's about a few hundred feet wider, the lake. But then other times on these bigger ones, the lake gets miles wide, but then most times it's only a few hundred feet wide. But they have this all mapped out for the last, several thousand years of changes. And that would be just the Silk Road that we understand, going through the deserts, through the Tarim Basin to Kashgar, across Uzbekistan, finally ending up through Kyrgyzstan and taking that northern route to Istanbul. But there was also a southern Silk Road, which the Chinese also were very familiar with for the same amount of time. It went south of Yunnan and crossed over near the Nujiang Valley into Myanmar, and then ran up through the Assam and the Arunachal Pradesh and Nagaland and these areas of India, and then joined over through Rajasthan and took that route that you understand through Afghanistan and Pakistan, Iran, up through and into Istanbul, the southern Silk Road. So not only that, but they had 2 variables of time in 2 parts of the planet, northern and southern, north above the Himalaya, south below the Himalaya, through several desert regions, all ending up over in Istanbul. And at that point, then you're looking at regionally there, Greece at least, and stories of other travelers that would have traveled, well, Italy's getting this because, and then something's happening in your desert as you're transiting through, getting more rainfall, the camel trains are locked up, they're getting bogged down in the mud or something somewhere. These accounts come through where camel trains get bogged down in the mud. Okay, but then what's happening over in Italy, because you're only 2 countries away if you're in Istanbul, like they're documenting all of this all the time, thousands of years of it. So for them, bringing it to the modern age, obviously they know something's changing. And I'm just curious how they knew the parts in America that were changing too. This is where the whole history thing, perhaps there was much more interconnectivity in the previous times than we were given credit for as humanity. This is linear thing, a bunch of people growing, some rice somewhere, growing some wheat somewhere, and eventually they settled down and created cities. And then after some time, there's some ships that went across the ocean, and then we finally connected, yay. Or was it connected prior, thousands of years ago, and whatever happened, cataclysm that wiped out that previous civilization or 2, and that global civilization, the reset is what we stumbled into, and suddenly, we're disconnected again. Infrastructure doesn't work anymore. We lost almost the whole human population. We need to rediscover engineering. We need to rediscover shipbuilding, etc. There's some stuff left over, yeah, but we need to recreate the past, and a lot of the records were lost. So really starting from scratch again. It takes a few hundred years, but you're right back at it again. You think about that for just a moment, and how long would it take if our civilization was set back really that far, where we disconnected because of so much damage, whether it be natural or whether it be man-made, doesn't matter. Would take a fair bit, but there would be records and people would have kept those records and they would have known. So why are the Chinese in these particular grow zones? Do they know something we don't? Because they encircled around in different parts of the nation. It's like they understood where the cold pattern would flow down from Canada. They avoided that, some of that Midwestern and that northern grow belt that touches on the Canadian border, but that's an area that's been having staggering barley and wheat losses as well. So Ransom, is there any way you could throw that map back up? I'd like to take a look at it, and because there's a pattern there that sets up. If you look at global temperatures during the Maunder minimum in the 1640s, you're going to find some of those same general areas that got really, really cold where the Chinese are not investing, which is interesting on that. I should have had you hold that map up there for a second longer. Something at play here, and the spreading of Chinese buying, but then you also had that secondary graph there of other areas that were owned and operated by different nations as well, all within those same nations. But you notice there's those same states that nobody's in. Why are they not in any of those states? Why are they not there? You know, you can't say anything nuclear because that stuff drifts. Is it because of, I don't know, you fill in the blank. I don't understand it. They're avoiding some states. Yeah, it makes sense on the grand solar minimum, but they couldn't grow crops in the 1640s, and they had to move entire grow zones 150 miles south, even some places 300 miles further south in Canada, to get the same corn to grow, pushing it way down to the Great Lakes, comparatively where it was before. So what do the Chinese know about our climate going to shift in our areas which be productive for agriculture or not? They're giving you the map right there. That's insane. Yeah, that whole area of map up there in the northern United States, those like Montana, Idaho, South Dakota, North Dakota, that whole area just becomes an ice box where nothing can really be grown up there, except in off-periphery seasons. And look, even Iran, Cuba, China, Russia, and Venezuela are all avoiding that spot, except for one area in Venezuela that bought that middle of, what's that, Montana there, southern Montana. Otherwise, there's very little up there. See, and if you look at the old maps, that is a swath right down through the middle of what we consider our grow belts. Now, Ransom, if you can look up on just a search engine, Maunder minimum North America temperatures, reconstruction map, and you will see that blinding streak comes down at exactly where they're not investing any of those countries. Maunder minimum temperature reconstruction map, North America temperatures. Maunder, M-A-U-N-D-E-R. Yeah, there it is. Maunder minimum reconstruction map temperatures, North America. And what you see, it's going to blow your mind when you see the matchup of where those maps are not and what overlays with that. It's a really famous one. If anybody wants to follow out there, please do this yourself. And, you know, this is where you try to back up some of the things we're talking about. Now, perhaps we don't have a link because this is just common stuff we've been talking about for years. But to match this up now, this map comes from an article, and then the Maunder minimum temperature reconstruction. That's hundreds, or if not thousands, of peer-reviewed articles coming together to try to show what the temperature was comparatively and how much it dropped 1 to 2 degrees Celsius during the Maunder minimum and how that affects crops. But that is swooped right through the middle of our most prime growing areas in the Midwest grow belt. And as you can, you know, proceed further north, it's a complete wipeout of crops up into Canada. So these two, Maunder minimum reconstruction map. I'll let you get back to it. Why don't I send you a map, Ransom, and I'll let you take over here. I'll dig into some stuff and I'll send it to you here because this is what my forte is this.
Sorry, everything was freezing. I think I got that up there. If that's the map you're talking about,
Oh, that is it right there. Yes, it is. Now look, now overlay that. You see where that blue streak is coming through North America? It starts way up west of Hudson Bay up there into Canada. That's Alberta and Saskatchewan. These are the same areas that are losing an enormous amount of crops already. Now run that down west of the Great Lakes and then see which states those are, and where it's darker blue, darkest blue, obviously that's more than a degree Celsius, which is more than 2 degrees Fahrenheit. And then that lighter blue also, but that dark blue swath is really where you're going to concentrate the most crop losses. Now there's some different maps out there also that are a little more granular that can get you in on it. But now flip back to that other map where nobody's investing in those states, and you'll see why. Yeah, is your computer locking up again too, huh?
Yeah, it's all right. I just rebooted my browser so I could bring it back up.
And once you start to find these little breadcrumbs that match up, then it can make a wider picture into, all right, somebody knows that these changes are coming again, and they're trying to, what would you do? Now, you knew this area here, just as a mind experiment for everybody out there. You're looking at this Maunder minimum reconstruction map, and you go, wow, even foreign nations are not investing in these same states. So obviously the productivity of whatever GDP they were having coming out is going to be limited. Now go up to the China map, and that'll really show you where it's at. Go up to the China map, or down to the where the Chinese are investing totally, and it runs that same course of it. Go to the top of the article there, and that same map that was all red with all the red states that China was investing in, and you'll see the similarity of where it's not. So you would extract the wealth out of those out of those states right there. You see how the top of it, like where that blue streak's coming through, none of those states are being invested in. So they must know something we don't. Anyway, I'll leave it there. That was my correlation for it.
Well, this is out there, but maybe this article here that talks about the Navy commander warning that foreign nationals are attempting to penetrate bases. And then you go back and look at this map down here where they show it break down by county. And there's some pretty strategic places on this that may not be about farming, but might be about doing things way out in remote areas so people don't watch you do them, and having outlets in each of the major states around where food is. And then a bunch by the District of Columbia. You can see you have Iran, Cuba, like everybody's buying stuff up around the District of Columbia. It looks like a rainbow there, but on this map, almost all of it is Chinese investors. So, I mean, as far as the color code, but there's this one spot down here that's red that is invested into by Iran. And if you know where that is, well, that's Eagle Pass, that's Del Rio, that's where the majority of the crossings in Texas happen. And guess who's popping up in those, groups of people that are coming across the border? They're not just coming from Iran and Turkey and Greece and all these other places, but a lot are coming from China. And guess what happens to them? A lot of them just walk right through. Others are stopped and then given a court date. And I'm sure that, maybe we have intelligence watching them. But when you realize how much they invest into our country and how much some of maybe the politicians might be in their pocket, I'll just put it that way, then this idea of, groups and waves of people coming in and then happening to, just start camping near military bases and stuff like that, or strategic areas where you could shut down grids, where you could mess up the food production, where you could get your people across the border, where you could train in remote areas. Those are all on that map there. So I don't know what you think about that. Oh, I got the wrong picture there. Yeah, I don't know it's like I got hacked tonight. The whole computer is just acting crazy. I really do think that they're purchasing in places to, not only make money, because, how the Chinese model is. They use every asset available that they can use. So there could be multiple things going on. They could legitimately be growing and making money and selling products for companies, but at the same time, they have outlets right here in the U.S. Now, I wonder how many companies and military bases and police stations and, assets we have located in China, in mainland China. And I would bet that would be almost zero. What do you think?
Less than zero. Yeah, do you think they're going to let you put something in their country? Not even a chance. So for us to unpack our country like this and allow everybody to purchase it, it's a little bit different than the way it operates around the world and other places. Yeah, you can put a factory up and that factory's in a factory zone or some special economic zone. And you can own that little sliver of property, but you're not wandering off into the middle of China buying up 300,000 acres of their farmland as an American company or something. Not a chance. Even if there was some kind of joint venture, there would be at least 51% owned. 90% of all the staff would be Chinese in there. You might, get some agreement to provide all the tech and the inputs and whatever to grow it, but majority of it would stay in China. You might get some benefit from a, downstream product or whatever, but otherwise, that's not happening. I am looking at, think about that. You brought up the mosquitoes earlier, and with all this, huge amount of rain coming down across the planet now. After the Hunga Tonga eruption, obviously that water's got to come down somewhere. So it seems like it's begun coming down and it's amplifying the storms. And we have higher electrified skies, which is amplifying the storms. And isn't it interesting how all of a sudden these engineered mosquitoes were all put out in these last 1 year or so, when all these record floods and all this amazing amount of rain is beginning to come down all at the same time. So if you knew the cycle, there was going to be tremendous amounts of rainfall. Would you not release all the mosquitoes so they can continue to breed in different areas that normally don't breed? With the absurd floods across everywhere, middle of deserts across the Middle East, middle of the deserts across the Sahel, doesn't matter, middle of the Gobi Desert flooding, Sahara Desert floods. These are kind of insane things here. Northern Afghanistan, a lake. Pakistan floods. You look at some of these places, entire villages washed away that have been there for hundreds of years, but just scoured clean because the riverbed opened up that much. Like obviously the rivers were much, 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 much wider when that place was a savanna or lightly forested. You wouldn't build an entire village next to or in the middle of what is now a dry lake bed, but it's been dry for so long that even the big floods would, be contained into the very littlest, smallest amount of runoff comparatively to what it used to be when it was a floodplain 6,000 years ago when that place was converted and just like it is in North America. You wouldn't be building in the middle of the Mississippi River, but give it 6,000 years to dry out, and that might be some prime real estate on the banks of the Mississippi 6,000 years post dry out, where it would rain and it would go right in the center of the Mississippi and it would just be relegated to that little tiny thing there for hundreds of years. And then suddenly the cycle of rain comes back and these large rivers are starting to come back too. But then what always comes with hurricanes and floods and these kind of disasters? Mosquito-borne illnesses, because the mosquitoes have an enormous amount of places to set up shop. Places they've never been before. They're suddenly laying egg clusters in tires that absorb rain. When you throw away a used tire, you get that one area where it never really seems to dry out unless it's really dry for a long time, where that water will sit inside a tire that's laying down flat. Or, discarded and torn up tin cans or aluminum soda cans or whatnot. And they start to collect rainwater in there, tilted at a certain angle also. Some areas, there might be some bogs that form. There might be areas in the pith of a tree or where, two trunks come together that had never been flooded or had that much water before, but it's standing. Like with all this increased rainfall, there are trillions of new spaces for mosquitoes to start their families. You think about that. Where are these same places? Well, down there, exactly where that red part where Edon owns that. Think about all these crazy storms coming through Texas. How many more areas in the desert or the driest? Think about you out there, Ransom. Like how many new spots do you think mosquitoes can start breeding from the increased rainfall that you've seen out where you're at? And I would talk Four Corners area, just in desert in general. You had those massive floods that disrupted Burning Man, and it all started with the record floods in was at Palm Springs, and the incredible amounts of floods across and that reformed the lake that was once drained in California. His name escapes me. This amount of new rainfall coming down everywhere is creating new areas for mosquitoes to spread. And you said that was one of the vectors by which they would send new things out into the populace. So tell me about the rainfall in your area. Like, how much new additional rainfall has there been for places for critters like that to hide and breed?
Well, my spot's kind of a bad example of that, because we actually have, less than 2 inches annually. And then for the last couple of years, we haven't been getting that. So we're in extreme fire conditions. So there are no mosquitoes right now. However, the very first time that it actually rains, which I'm expecting in monsoon, mosquitoes just pop up out of, I've seen hordes of them. I've been caught in the desert with millions and millions of them, being the only life form around to, suck dry. And it's horrible. But the idea that they could be transferring something along with that is pretty scary. And, a few years ago, when they put out the articles about Bill Gates and other people releasing some of these modified organisms out into the environment, it said the first time ever. And I kept thinking, that can't be right. And sure enough, I went back through some of my old videos that were banned off of YouTube. And one of them contained a story about a company in Florida that was practicing doing that exact thing. What I mean by that is delivering medications that they created via the mosquito. Now, later, they're saying it's to reduce these problems, but at the same time, articles keep coming out saying that those specific diseases that are being targeted by the modified animals to neglect their impact on human society obviously isn't working, because those same diseases are the ones they're putting in the headlines as increasing, like West Nile virus, dengue fever, malaria, stuff that we're not used to in the United States. All of a sudden is happening here. And the only new thing that's happened, well, I'll let you think about that. But here's another angle that probably a lot of people haven't thought about. The number one reason that they tell people that they can't store water in areas that get very little water, like here, is because they say that it's a vector for mosquitoes to populate. And just like you were talking about, the tires, the cans, whatever, but we don't really get rain that often. And by the time that we get it, it usually dries up right away. So if you save it off the house in a bucket, yeah, it's true. If you leave the bucket uncovered, that might happen. But that's a silly reason to stop using available water for agriculture or for your yard or for your flowers, or even to store and clean it. So if you're putting a lid on it right after it rains, like you go outside like I do, I have buckets everywhere when it rains. I go put it out because it's free water and it's not chlorinated and it doesn't have forever chemicals to the degree that the municipal water is offering. So you could go out there and right when it's monsooning or whatever, you can get all that water, put a lid on it. If you have one, and you can store that water. And it's not going to grow mosquitoes in it. It might grow bacteria and stuff, but if you're using it for agriculture or whatever, that doesn't matter. But that is one of the reasons that they tell you can't save the water. You can't hoard the water. That's bad for the environment. It needs to shed off and get wasted and, go back up into the atmosphere or whatever. Because when it rains here, everything comes to life immediately within 2 days. Like all of the desert plants, animals, bugs, all of it. It just pops out and then it'll go dry again. They'll just all disappear until the next time it rains. But they're telling us here in New Mexico, there's new invasive species of mosquitoes from Florida and, different places somehow showed up over here. And they're a mix now, so that now we have hybridization going on between species of mosquitoes. Some of them may or may not be those ones that they released. But think about this. If that indeed is happening, it won't be long until you can't escape when technology merges with biology. I mean, literally, you can't escape it if it's in the water, if it's in the food, if it's flying around outside. If your kid can't even drink some milk from the corner store without worrying about an additive that may or may not, add additions to your, what do you call it? I don't know. I don't want to get us in trouble, but basically DNA, epigenetics, we'll just put it that way because that's not banned. Epigenetics, that's how your body works out dealing with the environment. But if there's new information telling your epigenetics to do something or don't do something, then we might be in trouble. And think about this. What I brought up before is all of these vectors that they don't ever say, what about the livestock that you're eating, right? So if it's getting put in directly intravenously, even the people that are organic farming or ranching, if there's little flying hypodermic needles out there, you might not be able to hide from that either. So where do we go from here? The only thing I can think of is there's a lot of geniuses out there, really smart people that are unhackable, but they can hack the system. And what you got what's that kid's name? He's a young guy that does all the microscope. He looks at everything in there. I forgot what his name is. He's the agriculture farmer that teaches. He's trying to teach people how to use the right soil and all of this stuff. Those kind of people. I forgot what his name is. I think it's Matt something. Probably people that watch your guys' your channel and the Oppenheimer probably know who I'm talking about. I forgot his name off the top of my head, but those kind of people are going to be our salvation because they're scientists that aren't participating in the system. They're scientists that are just at home looking at stuff and finding new ways. And that's what agriculture or permaculture, excuse me, is all about, right? It's figuring out how you can use the earth to your benefit and grow the most production with what you have. And that includes in the desert right here. So this year, because I planted so much last year and I had problems with bugs, I had problems with other things. This year we're cleaning up the lot. However, because I've been farming for 3 years straight in a row in my yard, all kinds of stuff is popping up that I didn't plant this year. I got potatoes out there. I got, wild clover growing and lettuces growing all over the place. There's potato plants popping up, melon plants, all of this stuff from excess that we just ate and threw outside. So think about that. So like when, we cut up the potatoes and there's a bad spot or whatever, I throw that outside. If we eat an onion, I save the bottom of it, whether it's either from the store or I grew it myself. We always save the bottom and just replant it. And then before you know it, there's a new onion out there in its place growing. And that, like potatoes, all of that stuff, you just throw it outside. So we eat a melon, I save like 300 seeds. At a point, you save so many seeds that it's not a big deal to start spitting out the seeds off your porch when you're having a nice summer melon out there. And all of those things end up popping up the next year. So I have food outside and I didn't even try to grow it. There's a broccoli plant that I already harvested last year. It's growing really big because, they live multiple years. And matter of fact, broccoli and those kind of things are great for the desert because it rarely ever gets below like 18 degrees. So your plant's just going to grow all year. I think there is ways around it, but the technologic nightmare is really something that we're having to deal with. And I know you're on Brighteon TV a lot, and Mike Adams there, he says some stuff that might not be right on the money, but he says a lot of stuff that is on the money. And the reason I like him is because he goes out of his way to actually test things and do some science to find out what's really going on. And, he would be a great person to do an experiment to send samples from all 50 states growing areas and find out what's exactly in your soil, what kind of microbes are not there, what kind are there, what kind of pollutants are there, and stuff like that. And I know he's done it for food items. But we're going to have to be very educated and not ignorant when it comes to the intake of everything from water to food into our body, and especially the medicines that are being offered, because we're in a new time and people just don't get that we've taken a technological leap beyond their understanding. And I get it. Most people don't have time to pay attention to a plethora of different topics all the time. And they're probably sitting at home going, oh, the Trump trial, oh, inflation, and they really just can't figure out why. So they're trained to just point at those empty people in the empty suits and say, oh, well, it's their fault. And then, well, maybe next 4 years will be good. Maybe the next people we elect in there aren't going to be bought and sold like they have been for the past 2,000 years. That's wishful thinking. And it makes me think that you just have to navigate the system and be both a citizen and a non-citizen at the same time. You have to participate and pay attention what's going on, but at the same time, you need a backup plan to get out of that system. And I don't see 95% of the population being able to handle a world that we're describing. They're just not going to be able to handle it. And I think that's the plan. Not only do they have real wet works program going on there, so to speak, or soft kill programs, depopulation agendas, but they have figured out how to make people do it to themselves through bad habits, ignorance, and in the long term, what does that do for our species? I mean, think about this. They try to convince us that it took tens of thousands of years for a specific species to change into a new species, or more like millions of years. But what happens when there's such a fast change to the genetic code of not only the humans, but all of the food they eat? What is that going to look like in the fossil record? I imagine it'll look really bad, but something like when chicken popped up. Because if you know about chicken, it's some kind of jungle bird that people started domesticating until it became chicken, and then it's gone through the most evolutionary difference of any other animal in history in a very short amount of time. And people all over the world now eat this animal that we've made like that we took and we domesticated it to a point, and now they're doing scientific things to it. I don't want to get into that because we might get in trouble, but that is all happening. And they know that the human has actually changed in genes 7% in the last 100 years. 7% change. That's a lot. And we don't even know what it did, who did it, why it happened, or what it does it mean in the long term. And we're stuck living in our own lifetime. So that's why I tell my kid, hey, you got to pay attention to all of this stuff at the same time as figuring out how to feed and clothe yourself outside of the system, because the system is temporary. All empires fail and everything changes. They're talking about climate change. Well, I know from my basic study that we're at the end of an interglacial, so you might as well tell your children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, great-great-grandchildren to look into investing in Coke companies, because it might get chilly for the next 80,000 years before it ever gets warm like it has been in the period of time we consider human history.
For this time around, but there've been two other interglacials with humanity, as we understand Homo sapiens sapien in it. So we're just the third, well, actually the fourth, if you consider coming out of that fifth one into the fourth one. Then humans would be anatomically the same as Homo sapiens sapien. Everything comes in fives, I guess. Speaking of fives, to take us out here, I have a slide in 2020. Well, we'll go 2023. Prices are a little higher now. 90% silver quarters had a melt value of $23.34. We're talking junk silver here. But in 1964, the minimum wage was 90% silver quarters. $23.34 if you're going to base it on the metals price for the $1.25 minimum wage, but it was paid to you in silver quarters or silver. So you look at that, 1964 wages unadjusted for silver price is still $23. We need sound money. So in addition to all these things that are happening right now that Ransom and I spoke of through the evening here, there is an entirely new grain exchange starting with sub-Saharan Africa through the Russian Union. And ECOWAS is now recombining and asking everybody else that had problems in the last few years that we've heard about to come back in and join the Saharan Regional Nations bloc, which is also with the Sub-Saharan Africa, Russian Union grain exporters, and they're going to trade their resources for grains to Russia. Russia's also pulled in Indonesia, Morocco, and Eritrea for some. We have just had the rug pulled from us. So as this economy goes into a tailspin of sorts, metals are going to be one way that you're going to be able to protect yourself. Now you look at some of these ridiculous predictions of silver at $340, silver at $160 coming up, gold running to $8,500 an ounce. I mean, these are the prices if you get into a really inflation, not hyperinflation, but very, very inflationary environment as things try to readjust. If the crops aren't there this year, you're definitely going to be looking at $15 a gallon gasoline. these ethanols that are produced to put into the fuel tanks, if we're losing crops and they can't do it, what's going to happen? The mandates are going to still require by law. There's going to be less fuel out there, period, because there won't be enough ethanol. And the storability of ethanol is really low too. I mean, you can keep grains in a silo for a good year, maybe two. You can't keep ethanol for 2 years. You know, it's spoiled. It's unusable by then. It's soaked up so much water. It just doesn't work like that. Pretty much once they produce it, it's consumed within 3 months into the fuel supply. So if they can't grow the corn to put into the ethanol, then our fuel supply stops in America also. So it's not just about the food. It's about the fuel now too, because see, that's all been written in law and legislated and mandated and legalese and lawfared down your throat. Every time you look on that label, it says 10% ethanol, 15% ethanol. Oh, we're just eating your engine away and making your car is going to need repairs prematurely by, you know, stripping the oil off the rings, etc. Read it. Should be a warning label is what it should be for your engine. Nobody wanted that. I lived just fine with, you know, premium gas that was 100%. Now you need to seek out the 100% gas. As all these things get more and more expensive, the thing that will, I really believe, keep you through is going to be storable foods, obviously, if you have that. But also some precious metals, because if it runs away and you're holding like a 5-ounce bar of silver, for example, oh no, let's do it 1 ounce, super simple. At today's price, at $30 an ounce, I'll round it to 30. You can, and I'll even round gasoline up to $5, even though it's not remotely close to that, unless you're in California. You could still get 6 gallons of gasoline for an ounce of silver. Hold on to that same 1 ounce of silver. If gas goes $15 a gallon, then it won't much matter, because your 1 ounce of silver should be at that price where you should still be able to get at least 6 gallons of gasoline for that 1 ounce of silver. Don't care what the paper's doing. The paper's reflecting the metals. The metals are holding their value. The paper price is going up, but the metal, that 1 ounce, didn't move. It didn't get bigger in your hand. It's exactly the same. The paper's reference price off of it. So that'd be $75 an ounce then, or what? 90. Be $90 at 6. So then what if it's $30 a gallon? It shouldn't much matter, because you're still holding that same 1 ounce of silver. So the price of silver should equal. You could still get at least 6 gallons of gas for an ounce of silver, even if petrol was $30 a gallon. And probably get a premium on your silver, because at that point people would want the silver more than the paper money. We're going to repeat a lot of things in history here, so it's good to look into a history book and see how people traded. And, you know, are you thinking about how to make silver for a 1 ounce round? Everybody got 1 ounce rounds. They're going to be coming out. They're going to be bleeding out of the woodwork when prices get high. What not a lot of people have are like fractional rounds, or a 1/10 ounce, quarter ounce, half ounce. What if you don't even have that? Like, how are you going to get that old, like I was referencing, the 1964 quarters? Do you have any of that stuff that I could, okay, I got a 1 ounce round, but you need to break me off, you know, a half ounce change somewhere. Or you need to break me off 0.75 of an ounce, 3/4 of an ounce. I need my change. Is anybody thinking about how to transact that way yet at all? You're going to have to be thinking about that, in addition to, you know, okay, I'll give you 2 eggs is equal to something is fair change. Anything's going to be usable, but it's all going to come down, and you're going to have to weigh things and know your weights and measurements incredibly well to survive in this new world. We are stepping back in time. You can no longer rely on companies to assure the weights and measures any longer. You need to take that into your own hands. Anyway, thanks for listening. Ransom Godwin, David DuByne, signing off here. Many Ice Age Conversations, Thursday nights, FM to midnight, Revolution Radio. See you next week. Oh, remember our show notes, oilseedcrop.org. MIAC radio show will send you the notes of what we talked about tonight. Sign up for the newsletter and show notes.
Thank you for listening to